I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Session 2 of the Father's House. I want to think a little bit more about the meaning of the Father's House. In those days, when a young man married, he would make an agreement with his prospective bride's father and also with the girl. And once the agreement was made, that was the actual engagement, if you like, or the betrothal. But they weren't married right then, because what the man would do is he'd go back to his father's house and he'd start to build a room for himself and his new bride. And it wasn't until that was ready that he would then go and collect his bride and bring her to her new home. She would then become part of her husband's family. She would live in their extended house, and she now became the responsibility of the groom's father because she was part of his father's house. Now you can see this picture in the words that Jesus spoke to his disciples when he was preparing for his death. He said, "There are many rooms in my Father's house. I'm going to prepare a place for you. When I've done this, I'll come and I'll take you to be with me." Here, the Father's house is obviously not the temple. It's the presence of God. It's more meaning than just the presence, though. It involves belonging to the family. We're brought into the family of God. A man would take his new bride and she would become a part of his family, and that's what Jesus does for us. Now, go back to creation. God created a perfect world out of chaos. He gave human beings the responsibility to care for that world. With the rebellion of Adam and Eve, the world or the creation began to turn back into chaos. But God chose to redeem his creation, and he chose to use human beings to work with him in that redemption. And so he began with Abraham. Abraham at that time was a nomad. They lived in tents. He had a knowledge of God because God had called him out of his homeland in Ur and told him to go to the land of Canaan. Now Abraham one day was sitting outside his tent and he saw 3 men approaching. And in the desert that was a bit unusual. But we read Abraham hurried to meet them. He asked them to stay and have refreshments. He also washed their feet, which is a lovely thing to do in a desert which is hot and sandy. And then he went to Sarah in the tent and said, "Quick, prepare bread from making the bread from flour." But he said, "Use the finest flour." And the finest flour was wheat, and it was very expensive. And he said, "Bake 3 seahs of this flour into bread." Now a seah is 25 pounds, just under 10 kilos. So she's being asked to bake 30 kilos of flour, and expensive flour at that. Then Abraham went and killed a choice calf and had it prepared so that these men were able to feast in style, an extravagant feast. Now he didn't know who they were. We do now because we've read the scripture. But he didn't know who they were. They were total strangers to him. And yet he greeted them and welcomed them so generously. The episode shows us the nature of Abraham. He would welcome and honour strangers. And so this is the one whom God chose to begin his work of redeeming the creation, because this is the characteristic that he wants of his people. Abraham the patriarch welcomed strangers into his household. They'd had the experience of being welcomed into the Father's house.
I have a maker, he for my heart, before even time began, my life was in his hand. He knows my name, he knows This is